We're streaming live now, so I do want to dedicate the shir to the memory again. Esther, what was Esther?
Esther Tehila.
So
Rav Gabriel Pinchas.
Shama should be elevated through our learning. Okay, so we are up to Sivan Reish Nun Vav. It's almost like it's like a commercial break in the midst of the laws of how to treat food on Shabbos. Reish Nun Zayin, which will probably begin today, also talks about the laws of Hatmana with a tremendous amount of depth. I kind of promised you for a while that this is a topic that will be fully given its own treatment, and we're almost at that point. And then. Yeah, we're about to start. We're about to start Reish Nun Vav, and then when we get to Reish Nun Tet, Reish Nun Tet as about some more laws about Hatmana and the topic of Muktzah as it relates to Hatmana, and at the end of that there is a wonderful summary that is brought forth by the Mishnah Brura to review the laws of Shehiyah and Hatmana and Chazara. So at that point, we'll read the entirety of that summary, which hopefully gives us again some key practical takeaways from months and months of learning. But we're not quite there yet. We'll get there. That's in our radar. And once we get past that, we will then push into laws that relate to the preparations for Shabbos, the candle lighting, Kiddush. So the things will really kind of change to the mitzvos that relate to the beginning of Shabbos. And we'll talk about the davening on Shabbos, the laws of the Hilchos Tefillah on Shabbos. So things are going to kind of change. They're going to get a little lighter. We have to get through the tunnel to get there. But here we got a little bit of a commercial break because this is not a. It's even why this is here. Let's read the Sivan Reish Nun Vav. The header, the title of it is Sheish Tekiyos Hayu Token Be'erev Shabbos, the 6 shofar blasts that they used to blow on Erev Shabbos. So, Sif Aleph, which is the only Sif here. Shulchan Aruch writes, Kishayu Yisrael Yishuvan Hayu Token Be'erev Shabbos Sheish Tekiyos Kidei Lahavdil Es Ha'amin HaMalacha. And by the way, in a vacuum, that's all the Shulchan Aruch wrote here. That's all Rav Yosef Kar wrote in the Shulchan Aruch on the Siman is this: that when the Jewish people were in their yishuvan, when they were in their that's a good translation for the word yishuv.
It's really settlement, isn't it?
Community. Right, it's in their own community. That's a good word. Shlomo, the word community. When they were in control of their own community, right? Not as diaspora, where there was a little, part of the town that was a Jewish neighborhood. No, when the Jewish people were in their yishuvan, you token be'erev Shabbos, they would blow on Erev Shabbos sheish tekiyos 6 shofar blasts. Why? Kedei lahavdil, in order to separate ata'am, the nation, min hamalacha, from doing malacha, from doing prohibited labor on Shabbos. Okay, this was an old tradition. It's mentioned in the Gemara on Shabbos on Daf Lamed Hey. They would blow these shofar blasts, and each one signaled another thing to the community. Right, and now it's X amount of time before Shabbos, so you should start closing your store. And now it's time for candle lighting, and each one had a significance to it that kind of let the Jewish community there know what they were up to. They didn't have a clock; they didn't know exactly how much more time. So there was a communal shofar blast to kind of keep people on track on Erev Shabbos. The Rama adds in here, V'nohagu ba'kehilos hakadoshos, that there was the practice in the holy communities, shekol shehu samuch l'Shabbos chachatzi shah o shah, that when it got to about half an hour or an hour before Shabbos, shemachris shliach tzibor, the shliach tzibor the messenger of the community. That's what a shliach tzibur really means. I don't know that they sent the chazan out to sing to them that it's almost Shabbos, but they sent out the shliach tzibur would announce lahachin atzman l'Shabbos. Prepare yourself for Shabbos. V'hu b'mkom hatkiyos b'yamehem, and that was in the spirit of the tkiyos that they used to have. It was the same idea, except instead of blowing a shofar, there was a guy going around. And again, I don't think it's like it's like quite like today, even in our community here, where people live in this direction, right? As opposed to the Smiths who live 10 steps from the shul, right? The Farbers live a nice walk up the hill to the shul, and then you go in the other direction. That's you'll find Bill and Diane. Everyone's very spread out in our community. I don't think that that's quite how it was in many of these communities in Eastern Europe. Certainly at the time of Ramah was talking, you had a little quarter. I don't know, you had a little area. So here it would be impossible. And I guess you could drive around the neighborhood, but it's also people's the way people live today is not the way they lived at then. Our houses today, you barely hear what's going on outside unless the car alarm is going off. You don't really hear much. So anyways, that was the old custom. And the Ramah writes that that's fitting to have such a practice in all places, that someone should go around and announce that Shabbos is coming. I don't know, by the way, it's very interesting. Did this happen in pre-war Jewish communities in Europe? I don't know.
Yes, Jacob Katz has a book, Out of the Ghetto, where he describes life in the ghetto.
Yeah.
And one of the things he mentions is someone walking around before Shabbos to announce Shabbos and to make sure, and then to go back to make sure people stop working. So yes, it did happen. I would put it probably at the 15th, 16th, maybe 17th century.
Right.
I don't know, going out, how close to now it happened. But I have a question. The Mishnah Berurah doesn't say anything prescriptive. It just describes something that happened. It doesn't say it should happen.
You mean the Shulchan Aruch?
But the Ramah does say that it would be appropriate that this happens everywhere.
Yes, it seems as though the Shulchan Aruch is just describing what was, right? And he kind of leaves it at that, right? And maybe that's relevant for the Jewish communities in Israel, but there were very few at that time. I guess true that he himself moved to Tzfat later in his life, the Rav Yosef Karo. I don't know if they did that in Tzfat, by the way. Did they still use a shofar? But the Ramah is definitely, yes, prescriptive in the sense that here's what you should do in place of this, right? It doesn't make sense for the Jewish people to start blowing the shofar on Erev Shabbos, and then it'll make the non-Jews in the community, they can start blowing the shofar in the middle of the street and whatever. But yes, it seems that there we should do something to help the community know when Shabbos is coming. So what you're describing from Jacob Katz, if it's exactly what the Ramah is saying here, which sounds like certainly happened in Krakow, and I'm sure in other places too, in Europe. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. There are only two comments. Let's read them. So Aleph, Samuch LaShabbos Kachatzi Shah, close to Shabbos, about a half an hour before. Hainu Chatzi Shah Kodem Sheniskase Hashemesh Meitonu. That's 30 minutes from when the sun is, covered over from, is covered from us, meaning before sunset. Vezeu Chrazas Hashliach Tzibur Al Kol Bnei Ha'ir, and that's when the Shliach Tzibur would go and announce for all the people in the city, Shiyiru Lahachin Etzmam L'Shabbos. Go and prepare yourselves for Shabbos. Ulevale Malachos. Now, what about the people who are working? Right? The average regular person is getting ready for Shabbos. That's just stammer in your house. You're preparing the food. You're like, the Shliach Tzibur is coming through. Okay, I have a few minutes left. I got to stop really my cooking. I got to finish up. I got to do my shehiyah. Whatever needs to happen. And now what about the Balei Malachos? Sorry, what did you say, Hinda?
Yeah, if they're doing that half an hour before Shkia, that's much too close to Luke mentioned.
Yeah, that's why I think that they would. This is not for the workers. The workers is a moment they got a much earlier announcement. But this is for the people in their homes, right? So the food, please stop your cooking. Please, now is the time to stop, right? Prepare the candles. You light the candles in a few minutes. This was the very late in the day reminder, like it's basically Shabbos finished. It's like when kids are working on assignments in class. They finish the sentence that you're on and put your pencil down, right? It's like finish whatever last thing you need to do and be done. That's what this 30-minute alarm was before Shabbos. And you'll be aware. You're aware also from just life, and we'll learn this a few months down the road, that we don't light candles ideally right before Shkia. We light them usually at the time it takes to walk a meal, which we usually estimate to be 18 minutes before Shabbos starts. So 30 minutes before is really not that far from candle lighting time.
Later on, it describes this as being addressed to women folk, quote unquote.
Who said this?
Later on, it says, in the translation, it says this is addressed to women folk.
Oh, to help them prepare their candles and and probably the reality is that they were the ones who were working on the food preparation. Yeah, I think it makes sense. This is really like it's time to stop inside your home. It's time to make Shabbos now. But here the Mishnah Berurah says ulabali malachos, for the people who were at work, right? This is they're at the office. They're in the fields. They're whatever. They're at their malacha. They're working in the jewelry business, whatever it is. It'd be fitting for the community to send somebody earlier to those people. 2.5 hours before the 3 stars come out. Shuzman mincha katana, which is the time of mincha katana, which is not, it's true, but it's also, there's an argument about this point. Some say mincha katana is 2.5 hours before, not Tzeis HaKochavim, but before Shkia. So it depends if you hold like the Magen Avram or you hold like the Vilna Gaon about how you calculate the hours of the day. Do you start from dawn till 3 stars, or do you go from sunrise to sunset? We generally, like in our bulletin, will list the latest time for Kriya Shema based on the calculation of the Vilna Gaon, which is the opinion of the Vilna Gaon, which is from sunrise to sunset. But the Magen Avram, I believe, had the opinion, which is why you see he has a different time for Sof Zman Kriyat Shema or other things. He has the latest time for, or a different time because he had a different calculation, which was from Alos Shachar, from dawn until 3 stars. So here, the Magen Avram is being channeled in this comment. That's why we're being given the time of Tzeis HaKochavim. And he said, as we mentioned in Siman Reish and Aleph, there we talked about the idea of stopping certain malacha X amount of time by mincha katana. We should really be refraining from malacha. Tell that to a rabbi, by the way. You have to stop working at mincha katana. Okay, and now we get the translation, which is here about an hour and a quarter before the sun goes down, which is typically. What was that, Shlomo? That's before the 3 stars, and so now what he's saying is that's about an hour and a quarter before sunset. Right before the sun is covered over. So that's about the time today that I believe we call that Plag HaMincha. So anyways, bottom line is that by Plag HaMincha, right, which is already theoretically the earliest time you can accept. So it would be good if there could be a separate announcement for the people who are still at work. Okay, Od Kasav Magen Avram. The Magen Avram writes further. The Roy Levali HaChanuyos Sheyizgeru Chanusan. It's fitting for owners of of shops to close their stores about an hour before Shabbos at least. Ki gedola hamachshela, because how great it is, the stumbling block. What happens? A minister from the local government comes into your store shortly before Shabbos, 15 minutes before the sun goes down. You're like, I'm just going to close 10 minutes. My house is 5 minutes down the road. I showered in the morning. I'm okay. I'll go straight to shul. And what happens? In walks the government official until they're negotiating with you, doing business with you, and you can't just walk away from them. It's not so simple. And mamish, that's right until it gets dark. And you basically are going to be working right till Shabbos. At least if you close an hour before Shabbos. So worst comes to worst, they walk in a minute before. You'll finish the business transaction before sunset. So you should always have it on your door, on the sign that has the hours posted on Friday, 1 hour before sunset. Okay. I think here at Seasons they're machmir for 2 hours or 2.5 hours before sunset to close Seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Well, exactly. That's right, because everyone has to go to New Jersey.
Yeah,
They don't just simply work in Westchester. Actually, right, Tommy, weren't you involved for a while in helping close the store? Was it 2 hours, 2.5 hours?
yeah, but that before COVID, I did that so they could get home for Shabbos and they could stay open a little longer.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. The problem is they all live in New Jersey. The
Yeah,
people
they live
in
in New Jersey with traffic and everything else. They can't make it.
They can't make it, exactly. So if they lived here in Westchester, they could stay open maybe a little longer. But
Right.
okay. All right. Umilvad zeh. Aside from this, Kafi Haragil Shahanashim, and this is to the Steve's point here. Kishabaos Meachanuyos Rochatos Velov Shos Big Day Shabbos Kodam Hadlakas Haneros. So aside from this, there's another reason that we should be blowing the proverbial shofar here at a certain 30 minutes before, and also closing the stores an hour before Shabbos. Why? Because who are in the stores? Who's buying the food? Right? The women are coming home from the stores. And what do they need to do? They need to wash up. They need to, bathe, shower. Lov Shos Big Day Shabbos. They have to get dressed for Shabbos. Before the time for Hadlakas Neiros, before the time for candle lighting. If the store is open 30 minutes before Shabbos, 15 minutes before Shabbos, human nature, and this is absolutely true, I am guilty of this every week. You tell me Shabbos starts at 5:31, I'll be ready at 5:30. Shabbos starts at 7:30, I'll be ready at 7:29. That's how it works. And so if the stores are open late, the women are going to be there late, and they'll come home late. Chas v'shalom, misvik chilul Shabbos, and now we're going to be running right into Shabbos, and there's a suffix of desecrating Shabbos. Ubefrat, and in particular by Yom HaKatzar, in the winter days, the days that are short. It's a very short day. So Alkein Mahanacha Me'od Sheyakdimu Latzis. They need to leave the store early. Perhaps that means that the store should be closing early, so thus not tempting anyone to be in this situation. The Odos Kabbalah Shabbos Gamkein Yesh Kilkul, and then in terms of the the whole situation of accepting Shabbos is also going to be a kilkul. It'll be messed up. Why? Sharov ha'am yesh lahem heter b'tos. They'll say, Yankel is still doing this, and Sarla is still doing this, and okay, I still have a few. I must have a few more minutes here. So there'll be a heter b'tos. People will think it's okay by accident, by mistake. Shekol shelo amar baruch hu. Because why? The minyan won't have started yet. Everyone's going to come late. Baruch hu didn't happen yet. Between that twilight, time, particularly on a cloudy day when there's no clocks, it's sometimes hard to know exactly when is the exact moment that the sun is set behind the horizon. So people won't start Shabbos on time. They'll do Kabbalah Shabbos late, right? Or they'll be standing there waiting for the 10th guy. Be like, "Where were you? We just came back from the store. We closed just recently. What are you handling me over?" Oh, Kabbalah Shabbos kivi hanohog b'yameinu, or Kabbalah Shabbos the way we do it today. Maybe we say it a little bit early according to the tradition. Some communities brought in Shabbos while it was still daylight out, which is acceptable as long as it's after Plag HaMencha. So Osin kol hatzarich lahem l'Shabbos. Afal pi shehu laila mamish. What are they doing? These people are doing all the things they need for Shabbos, even though it's already nighttime, because everything gets pushed and pushed and pushed. And particularly when it's not clear when, today it's very different. You have a look at your clock and it's the Shabbos starts at 5:36, so But when you're dealing with looking at best a sundial, and you're trying to tell time from the sun, as we'll discuss when we get to the laws of candle lighting, what do you do on a cloudy day? How do you know? It's getting darker, but it's cloudy. So what is it? Is it really night? Is it really the next day already? It's hard to know. So you could end up running right into nighttime. That's why we should try to accept Shabbos early in general, and I think here to refrain from halacha a little bit before Shabbos. Right? We should really try to stop, because that way we don't run into Shabbos, run up against the clock, and perhaps violate Shabbos. Ve'ein lahamtin al adam gadol shadayin lo ba im igi azman shel kabbalah Shabbos ki zechus hulo shelo yischal Shabbos al yadav. Don't wait for an adam gadol. Don't wait for a great person who hasn't. Oh yeah, he did. Reb so and so didn't show up yet to shul, which means that he's not yet accepted Shabbos. It sounds like. If you think it's the time of Shabbos, right? If it's the time of Kabbalah Shabbos, right? The time when the community usually davens, right? We try to gather together as a community 15, 20, 30 minutes before Shabbos. We should do it at the usual time. And don't wait. It'll be a good zchus for the Adam Gadol that you didn't violate Shabbos because you waited for him. Better that you just do the normal practice of whatever the community is in terms of the acceptance of Shabbos. Bottom line from this.
Several years ago, we had a guest speaker who on Friday night said he hoped one day he'd come to shul on Friday night and not see everybody have wet hair.
Yeah,
Meaning
I
not do
heard
what
that.
you and I do in terms of 7:29 when Shabbos is 7:30 and whatnot. This did not go over well in our community.
No, and I'll tell you why it didn't. I'll tell you, I was very upset, and I told him afterwards. I said, would you prefer that people take their shower on Shabbos? So they take it before Shabbos and their hair's still wet. Big deal.
There you go.
It
Yeah,
didn't go over
I hear the critique. I understand where this person is obviously coming from. They're trying to say, halavai, we should be, walking into Shabbos with a great ease. My only challenge is that not only challenge to it is that Maisim b'chol yom, as you see, goes back to the day. This is not a new problem. The Jewish people struggling to get ready for Shabbos. The Jewish people for millennia have struggled to be ready on time for Shabbos. I am part of a great tradition that continues this, where you are frantically, running around the house. You're telling your kids, turn that off. It is an age-old tradition. It's just the Metzias has changed. That we didn't tell our children to turn the toys off, to treat the TV off, 50, 60, 70 years ago. 50 years ago, yes, but I don't know. 100 years ago, for sure, they weren't describing to their children, don't turn the TV off. Do this. It was different, but the idea was exactly the same. Okay.
By the way, Rabbi, there is a high-tech solution for the announcements. My Siddur app sends me a note every Friday for 40 minutes to candle lighting.
Oh, they should have a chauffeur sound come off of it.
Yeah, they don't do that, but effectively they do send a reminder.
Right, and by the way, you've been in Yerushalayim. Some of you have been in Yerushalayim for Shabbos before. You know that there's a tradition and a custom to. How many minutes is it before? It's
40 minutes.
40 minutes. 40 minutes before Shkia, there's a siren that goes off in the town. And that is very much in the spirit of this tradition from the Masechah Shabbos.
I actually set my oven timer 10 minutes before, and you can hear it all over the house, for 10 minutes before candle lighting. And then when the 18 minutes starts, I set it again.
There you go.
So that, this is your absolutely right.
But see, okay, so Hinda's lighting 28, or has an alarm almost kechatzi shah, 28 minutes before the sun sets. Excellent. It's exactly what it's supposed to be.
If you haven't taken out the garbage yet, Gene, you better do it right now.
What do you say, Shlomo?
When the Shulchan Aruch was written.
Shulchan Aruch, this was 1500s, if I'm not mistaken. 1500s.
This is an old issue.
He lives in he lives I think the 1500s.
1500.
Yeah, 1500s. Yeah, this is an ancient. This is an ancient work, and the Ramah was contemporary. Who was living in Poland. Okay, Sif Katan Beis, Bechol Makom. In all places that we should do this. It's obvious just to avoid Chilul Shabbos. So it's like Hinda's setting the alarm on the oven. These are things. Tommy's phone, 40 minutes. Okay. In Scarsdale, it's impossible. Everyone lives, different places. I can't get your attention. I can't go door to door for 450 families. Many of these communities in Europe, these small communities, are talking about 30 families, for 35, 40 families. That's a big community, by the way, 35, 40 families. Right? Hey, you hear the big towns, okay, the big cities. Okay. So this is what he's talking about. The big cities where you can't, it's just, it's not, doesn't make sense to go door to door. נכון מאוד שימצאו אנשים המסנדבים בעם ללך לרוזרס בכל רחובות קריה על דבר סגירס החנויות והדלקת הנרות. So yeah, they would have a committee. They would have a committee. Okay, you live in the Dorchester area, you live in the Bloomingdale Estates, you live in the Scarsdale side. Right? So everyone would kind of be responsible for their neighborhood and would go around on the streets and kind of announce, hey, Shabbos is coming. So they kind of split the job up. It wasn't one person like it was in the small communities. Time to close the stores and go around and someone say, oh, candle lighting time. So actually, he's reporting here. This is not a proscriptive, this is descriptive. In many of the big cities, presumably in Europe, there were chavuros kadoshos hamiyusados al hashgachas hashabbos. Maybe as Steve was describing earlier, there were chevras. There were groups of people, and these holy people that were there. Their job was to be hashgacha over Shabbos. They were the ones who were watching over Shabbos in their communities. V'ashrei chelkam, and how fortunate, how happy are they for their portion, right? Kihem mezakim es Yisrael avim shabashayim. They're strengthening the Jewish people to their Father in heaven, their relationship with God. V'yizku avur zeh hamischazkim tamim b'mitzvah zo levanim gedolei Yisrael. And what a merit, because of this, that they are strengthening always the mitzvah of their children, b'mitzvah zo levanim gedolei Yisrael, who are going to be, great, great gedolei Yisrael. Their merits, right? They should merit because of this strength in this mitzvah that their children, their children should be gedolei Yisrael. Okay. Bottom line is there's a description here of in certain bigger cities where they had chevras, just like you have a chevra kedisha, right? That they handled issues related to death and burial, and they're doing a tahara before the burial. There was apparently a chevra that helped on Friday afternoon in preparing the community to ensure that they would not violate Shabbos. They would close the stores and they would light the candles, etc. Before Shabbos. Okay, this is Reish Nun Vav. Again, has nothing to do with. Has one thing. What's its connection doing here in the middle of all these laws about preparing the food and preparing the fire that related to Shabbos? Here, what is it all about? Probably has to do with making sure that you're ready for Shabbos in terms of, as I mentioned in passing some half an hour ago, maybe already. Make sure you're doing shehiyah, right? Your food needs to be in its right prepared state before Shabbos. This would perhaps be a time when you'd be hearing your 30-minute, announcement before Shabbos. Okay, I guess I have to make sure to my food is in the right, correct state that it should be by the time that the sun sets very soon. And agav that, while we're talking about that, so we talk about the closing the stores and all the other things related to the shofar blast, the announcements before Shabbos. I think, if I'm not mistaken, even by the way, one of the 6 tekiyos, if I go back to the Gemara on Shabbos, which I'm not going to waste your time doing in front of you, I should have looked at it before. If I'm not mistaken, I think one of them actually has to do with food. If I'm not mistaken, maybe I'll look quickly right now here on my phone. But if I'm not mistaken, one of them here, it's a Shabbos Lamed Hey, right? And that may also be the tighter connection here that exists. Okay,
each tekiah has a different meaning.
Yes, and they did 6 tekiyos. Each tekiah had a different meaning for the people who were hearing it. That they knew to do this, they knew to do that. Here, hold on, I'm going to find it right now. I'm on the daf. Hold on. Where is this? Sorry, I just want to get this correct. Okay, here we go. This is in the sugya. It talks about Beit Hashmashos, which we learned many moons ago. At this point, okay, Sheher Tana Rabbanan. This is the brisa. Sheish Tkiyos Toke Erev Shabbos. Rishona. What was number one? Lahavtilas Ha'ameh Malacha Shebasados, to help the people go home from the fields. Stop your work in the fields. Number two is Lahavtil Oir V'Charuyos. In the city, the second one was for the people who are working in the city. Close your stores. The third one, Shlishis Lahadlik Es Haner. Light the candle. Rabbi Yehuda says the third one was really for lachlotz tefillin. Take off your tefillin, because you weren't supposed to wear tefillin on Shabbos. And then vishohe kedei, or is this here? Right, then after the third blast, right? Shohe kedei tzlias dag katan o kedei lahadbik pas batanur, right? After the third blast. After pauses, after the third blast, they would then take the little fried fish. They would fry a small fish, or stick the bread to the oven if your last last chance to cook a few foods, and so on and so forth. So one of them here, as you clearly see, had to do with sticking the bread on the oven wall. So again, one of them had to do with his idea of food preparation. I think that's why this is brought up in this context. Okay, Reish Nun Zayin. We begin another topic that will probably take us a good number of weeks. But at the end, you'll be able to pass the Bechina, and you'll really be able to really know the laws inside and out now of food preparation on Shabbos. Though we didn't cover the siman about bishul, we'll get to that Shin Yud Ches probably in 3 or 4 years from now. Okay, Ein Tomnin b'Shabbos afilu b'davar she'eino mosif hevel. The laws begin here. First law: you're not supposed to do hatmana on Shabbos, even with a substance that does not add heat. Hevel means like moisture, like thick, dense heat. So blanket. Sorry, that pun was not intended. Blanket rule here: you're not allowed to do hatmana on Shabbos.
I mean, put it back in the oven to keep it warm.
No. So let me explain the basics here of hatmana. So hatmana is when I have it could either be a pot. Most often it will, let's think of it in the context of a pot. I have a pot, and it has a lid too, and I take the pot because I want to retain the heat. So what might I want to do to retain the heat? If I wrap it in some sort of, could be a blanket, right? I just take a blanket and I envelop the pot in the blanket, so it's like almost like a thermos. It'll keep the heat in a little longer. So that's one way. Or I could, in those days, let's say, I don't do this, but if anyone here compost. No, yeah, I don't know. So you just don't, the science behind composting, hopefully a little bit. But if you ever go to a composting pile, you'll know never to stick your hand inside of it, because apparently the temperature is extremely hot when if I'm wrong, correct me. But my understanding is that it's very hot. Why? Because it's all the biodegrade. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff here going on from a scientific perspective. But certain food scraps, when they are piled together, can itself serve as a way to retain heat, and maybe even kind of add to the heat. So we'll see the description of, they put pots inside these almost like composting piles, food scraps, which as their, I forget what the word is here in English, as they're degrading, what's the word? Decomposing. Thank you. As they're decomposing, there's a chemical reaction in there, and it creates heat. So you could put it inside almost like a heat source. You could put it inside the pillow, or a pillowcase, or a blanket, and you could put it on top of a heat source. So either way, if it's enveloped in something, whether it's inside a heat source, on top of a heat source, in a blanket, on top of the heat, again, it has to be enveloped, whether it's in a heat source, on a heat source, or no heat source. On Shabbos, you can never envelop a pot of food in anything. no matter wrap the pillowcase around the pot on Shabbos, that is not allowed.
So wait a minute, why is a warming drawer allowed? It's
So
the same
warming
idea.
So here, this gets very technical. It really has to be something that's enveloped on all sides. Now, this becomes the source of an argument about the crock pot. How can you have a crock pot? How can you put food back onto how can you put the crock pot back? How can you even, we'll see, how can you even have the crock pot going the whole Shabbos? Because we'll see that on Erev Shabbos, you're not allowed to do hatmana, but davar shemosif hevel, something that adds heat. Some people will argue, but the insert of the crock pot is enveloped all around by the heating element, and on top there's a pot cover. So it's the cholent pot, that the insert is enveloped on all sides. So to which I argue, I'm not the only one who argues back. Be like, no, the pot cover is not a part of the pot cover is part of the pot. You can't start playing the pot cover as two sides here. The element I hear, but it has to be covered on all sides. It has to be enveloped on all sides, touching literally on all sides, which is why in a warming drawer, it's just there is no
touching all sides of the pot. Yeah,
exactly. It's not exactly. It's inside a larger cavity. That's all. If it was literally touching on all sides, yeah, it would be a problem. But that's not how warming drawers are made. This is here. The big fear is really. We'll see why there's a gzeira here. It all comes back to playing with the fire, playing with the heat source. It always comes back to that. But on Shabbos, the rabbinic gzeira made in this is right out of the Gemara. In Shabbos, you're not allowed to do hatmana on Shabbos with something that is not mosif hevel, even if it's just a pillowcase. Whatever it does, it's not gonna. I'm not adding heat. Doesn't matter. This is the rabbinic zera. We'll see why in a moment.
So hevel is what?
Hevel is like moisture. So it's heat. Think of a sauna when you're thinking of hevel.
But I could use a pillowcase if I leave the top of the pot uncovered by the pillowcase.
That is correct. Thank you for the clarification. That is correct. Yes. So they sell blankets. I think I've mentioned this before. They sell blankets literally, and it says on the blanket they make designs on this thing. It says Zachor Yom Shabbos Lakach, whatever it is that they put some Shabbos thing. So I told my Rebbe used to say that they should write on it instead of Shabbos blanket, it should say Mechal Shabbos blanket, because sometimes people put the thing and then what happens is one pot and then they put the blanket all around it, and if on the bottom you have it's on, and then they put it on a warming tray. So on the bottom you have the warming tray, and then you have the blanket all around it, like perfectly snug. That's a violation of hatmana on a davar shemosif hevel. It's on top of a heat source. So you have to be very careful. If you're going to use one of the Machal Shabbos blankets, do not fold it down. You can put it on top, but let the sides be open. Don't take the edges of the blanket and envelop the pot underneath it. Okay. Let's continue in the Shulchan Aruch. Aval besafek chashecha, home limbo. If it's safek chashecha, maybe it's dark, maybe it's not dark. It's twilight zone. It's unclear. Is it Shabbos or is it not Shabbos? Again, in our day and age, there's no such thing as safek chashecha anymore. Shabbos starts at 5:31. It starts at 5:31, right? There's not. But in the days of the Mishnah, this is a big question. It's not clear right now. So in a time when it's safek chashecha, so then you can do hatmana b'davar she'eino mosif hevel, where it's not on top of a heat source. Anyone know where this is from? This halacha that we just read, and I'll read the next part of it. But that part that's not in the Mishnah I'm thinking about here. Where you're not allowed to do hatmana in a davar hamosif hevel. So it's a heat source, adding heat to it. Even Erev Shabbos, you're not allowed to have that kind of a situation. So let me ask you all a question. What's going on here? Like where's this from? It's hard. Most of us don't get to it because at the end of Bamim Adlikin on Friday night, one of the last Mishnayos in the second chapter, says Safik Hashecha, Safik Hashecha. Tomen es Achamin, and there are a few other cases, but one of them is talks about Hatmana in the Bemel Likin. And there it talks about the case of Safik Hashecha. So if in that case you can be ma'aserin esad, you can do maser on tamai, and you can be tomed in esachamin, right? You could do hatmana. There, it's in a case where davar shemo eno mosif hebo. Anyways, so that's from Bamem Adlik. Next Friday night, you'll notice it when it's at the end though. And frankly, I'm not sure everyone. Sometimes the chasans go so fast. Not for myself. So. But it's in there. It's from the second chapter of Shabbos. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah now. The first 6 comments of the Mishnah Berurah, and probably with that we'll stop. Ein tomen v'chulei. La'achar shenizbah shel hatashel. After everything is fully cooked, right? You're not going to do hatmana. Hatmana doesn't help you cook the food. You have to cook the food first. So after you've cooked the food, rotzel hatmina v'davar sheyishmor chumo. You're like, look, I like to put it somewhere where I can help it retain its heat. Maybe also because there are a few different reasons here. Number one, I don't know, did everyone have an oven inside their house? I'm not so sure that was the case. Every single person, maybe they cooked it in they had communal ovens, they had whatever. And even if they did have their own personal oven, how big was it, right? You talk about the kira, that we had a spot for 2 pots. Let's say you were making a few different dishes for Shabbos. Now you need the space for something else, but you want to retain the heat. So what would you do? You would do hatmana. You would try to envelop it in something and keep it hot as long as you can till Shabbos. Kigon bekarim uksasos in pillows or blankets. Right? That's bechadoma, things like that. Or
Hatmana in this discussion.
What was that?
Hatmana in this discussion referred to taking something off the fire and doing hatmana. But if it was on the fire and you just and it's resting on the bottom, and I guess this is your kosher blanket, right? If it's on the fire and you're putting something around it, that's okay because it's not enveloped with with the pillowcase.
Oh, if it's not it's all right. So explain. So you put it on top on the 3 sides.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's considered enveloped because on all 4 of its sides, it's covered, right? Even though the bottom is really the heat source itself, that's still, according to I think Kimat, all the poskim, I think is a problem. That's considered enveloped.
Okay.
Yeah. So here, again, either you're putting it into pillows or what's the word? Not a pillow, a cushion, pillows and cushions, or something like that. The Asrulasos came to Shabbos. On Shabbos itself, you can't even do that into a pillow, for example, which is not a heat source. But why? The reason he says here, Deshema Yimsa Az Kedei Raso Tzonenes, V'Yarticho. Because perhaps you will find that your pot has gotten cold, and you will bring it back to a boil, and then the chayav mishum bishul. Think about a soup where it's liquid. We say yesh bishul achar bishul via liquid. So you could see that your pot will cool down, and as a result of that, you're going to be tempted to. Not you'll be tempted to.
You're
going to do hatmana, and here it's going to be a bedavar shemosif hevel. Okay, let me explain. I don't think he fully spells this out. What's the fear? If you put it inside a pillow, it's going to start to boil. No, it's not going to boil if you put it inside a pillow. The fear here is that if you envelop it in a heat source, so like the peat, P-E-A-T, like those olive scraps. It's very hot, apparently, according to the Gemara. When you put it inside the olive scraps, you put a pot inside all that. Or you just do my example. You put it over the warming tray, and you also envelop it on all sides. All right, maybe you'll bring it back to a boil, and it cool down all the way, and you'll violate some prohibition of cooking. And as a result of this, because you might put it on a heat source, in the and being matmin it, enveloping it and putting it on a heat source will bring it back to a boil. So therefore, the rabbis made gzeira, you can't even do this into a non-heat source on Shabbos. So hatmana across the board becomes disallowed. Again, putting it into a pillow on Shabbos does nothing in terms of raising the temperature. It will retain some heat, obviously, but that's why it became part of the gzeira too. Okay, the fear here is that you will bring food back to a boil over a davar shemosif hevel, and so davar she'ena mosif hevel is gzeira atu, as we say, because of the davar hamosif hevel. So everything got schlepped along in this gzeira that the rabbis didn't want any hatmana happening on Shabbos. If something has had hatmana erev Shabbos in a davar she'ena mosif hevel leading into Shabbos, then you can keep it in its packaging, and then you'll uncover it whenever you want to have your food. But that has to be done.
Please say that last part again.
Yeah, if the hatmana was done before Shabbos in a davar she'ena mosef hevel, like a pillowcase, like a blanket, that is allowed, but it can't be on a heat. It cannot be on a heat source. That is allowed. It going from erev Shabbos into Shabbos, and then if let's say you have a chicken soup and you wrap a blanket around it and it's off the fire, but you don't have space, so you want to keep it hot and you need the space or something else, you're allowed to do that. And then when the time comes for serving the chicken soup, you'll unwrap the blanket and you'll serve the chicken soup, not a problem at all. But again, it can't be on a heat source. On a heat source, it turns into a davar shemosif hevel. It's only allowed if it's davar she'eno mosif hevel.
Okay, but explain something. If it's on Shabbat, for example, how did they warm up the food during the day?
During the day, so that's when they had their kiro is garuf katum, and they would put it on top of the kira, right? This ancient oven. They would have they would have controlled the fire underneath in a way that you were not worried you will stoke the coals, and then they would put it on top. They would
So they
put
can
up
put it on top. That can make it almost could be a bishul, because the fact that it doesn't have a cover does not mean that it's not bishul.
So that's why if it was a liquid, you wouldn't be able to put it to reheat it, right? You're not supposed to reheat liquids because of this problem, right? But if it's a dry food, it's not a problem. But here, even if it's a dry food, just to point out, even the gzeira includes even dry foods, right? So you have a grilled chicken, still a problem here. Why? Because it's one big gzeira. The law was made as it is. There are no exceptions to that rule, even though the reason for the gzeira doesn't fit grilled chicken. I believe that the answer is it's the same. There's no difference.
So you can put it on the kira, but
You can't cover it, correct. You can't do the act of hatmana. That act, the rabbis were very fearful of allowing that action because it will lead to other actions of hatmana, which may be a problem of bishul in the end. Now you're all like going, boy, these rabbis, they come up with some rules. Yeah, it is what it is. I'm just the reporter here. Yeah. Let's keep going in that sif katan aleph. And even according to the opinions that say that you aren't going to violate bishul because ain bishul achar bishul afila b'davar lach, even by liquids, there is a minority opinion that you're just not cooking kibbutz nisbashal pamachad echad, since it's already been cooked once. Nevertheless, even they would agree to this gzeira. Ika lemigzar, there is to make a decree here, Shema, because perhaps Yechamameha al gabi ha'esh, you may heat it up on top of a fire. Our famous problem, you'll stoke the coals. And you'll violate the prohibition of havara, of creating a fire. So even if you want to be a wise guy and say that there's no such thing as bishul achar bishul with a davar lach, we're still worried you might play with the fire, the heat source. So therefore, do not do hatmana over a non-heat source, because you may do it hatmana over a heat source, and then you'll play with the coals. So no matter how you want to see this, no matter how you want to slice this, you can't do it.
But you can argue that even if you put your food on during the day on the heat source, without that mana, you can still have the problem. Maybe it's gonna allow you to not allow you.
Yeah. So Shlomo
play with the coals.
Yeah, Shlomo already.
How is that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Shlomo nailed this, perfectly. The critique of the last line is as follows: when we reheat, this is what Shlomo was saying. When we reheat food in general on Shabbos, what do? We do gerufa ketuma over in a kira, in the heat source of the kira, and then on top of the holes at the top of the kira, we can put a pot on them. Right? This is what we talked about, and and that's how you do shehiyah, and then you can do chazara back onto it. If we're talking about chazara when it's cold, then you can't do that. But like you do shehiyah that way. And then you could return it with as long as the conditions of Chazara are met, as we talked about many weeks ago. Here, what happened? Why are you going to play with the coals? If I'm putting it on, let's say, on top of the kira and it's wrapped in a whatever, I'm really going to do havara? I'm generally reheating the food. If anything, because it's enveloped and wrapped, I might have less of a mistake, make less of a mistake because it's not going to cool down, or it'll get hotter faster because it's enveloped. You hear what I'm saying? Like, we don't assume you're going to play with the fire when you're doing chazara in general on top of the kira. Here, suddenly we're going to be worried about yechata b'gecham. Well, obviously, you must have done grufu ketuma if you're going to return it to the fire in general here. So it doesn't. This part you have what to I think, as they say in the yeshiva, you have what to dingzach against it. You have what to point out as problems here in this last reason. That doesn't undermine. At the end of the day, we paskin first of all, yesh bishul achar bishul b'davar lach. There is bishul after bishul when it comes to liquids, and therefore the gzera is made. And once a gzera is made, at the end of the day, the rabbis can make the rules. Right, a law is a law. Sometimes we don't like the laws on the book. My son just got a book. He just, my second grader just got a book that all these, it's a book, it's a kid's book, all these funny, strange laws that are on the books in the United States of America and different states. That you're not allowed to take your cow out at a certain, these are not enforced, but all these funny laws that are still on the books, they're on the books, the book, and in Judaism, we enforce all the laws on the books, even if the reasons are whatever, and it's a stretch that this got included in it. Okay, nonetheless, that's the way it works. Okay. Just go to the time, it's 8:37. We'll stop here. We'll finish all the comments of the Mishnah Berurah through Vav next time. I don't want to take everyone else's time. But this was good. We covered Resh and Vav about the Tkiyos and that preparation aspect of Shabbos, and we began the discussion about. Hopefully, we got the basics down of Davar Shemosif Hevel, Davar She'ena Mosif Hevel. On Shabbos, nothing is allowed. Erev Shabbos, only if it's Eino Mosif Hevel. If it's Mosif Hevel on Erev Shabbos, it's a problem as well to do that. So, and we'll talk more about that next time. And then there's a lot of iterations that relate to the substance in which you're doing Hatmana in. So we'll talk about a lot of details. There are a lot of details that are ahead of us, but we got the basics here of hopefully some of the larger rules. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.